All right, let's do it. Here we go. All righty, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. Good morning. Happy Thursday. Feel free to use that in meetings at Therify, y'all. Thursday. To be here today with the crew at Therify. Before we dive in, wanted to, of course, give kind of a quick background about what this show is and really the purpose of it. So this started out 4 years ago by Dan, Jake, and I. Jake is no longer on the pod. I was saying there for a bit he's no longer with us, and Dan said you need to make sure you say he's still alive. I said that is true. So he's no longer on the pod, but we've been doing it for 4 years. We've pivoted a few times. So I was telling James backstage, because he's a new guy in the room, I said, is that we've really pivoted over the last year and a half to interview startups and builders and founders on their ideas, on their business plans, and really uncovering companies doing really cool shit that you probably haven't heard of yet. So really excited to have Therify on again. This is the second time guest on the show. One thing we love not only is uncovering companies and guests, but we also love following along with the businesses that are legit and that are building and giving a platform for founders and entrepreneurs to obviously talk about this. So really excited about this today. So that being said, I want to go and dive in. A lot to cover today. Warren, I'm going to intro you first. If you want to intro yourself, you're first. And then I'm going to go James next because James is going to have the longer. I'm going to ask him some other questions. I don't know James as much. So Warren, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. This is Warren Sadler, CTO and co-founder of Therify, big fan of Unicorn Finders, and glad to be back. But I'll pass on to my esteemed colleague, the one and only James Murray.
I love it. Go ahead, James. Tell us about yourself, big dog.
Well, yeah, James Edward Murray, CEO, co-founder of Therify. Really happy to be here. Been following the show for a while. And just really excited to be partnered with Warren on building something super special.
Absolutely. So I want to give a background, and James, I want to see how you kind of met Warren and how this idea came to life, especially too because it's been over a year and a half since we had y'all. So we might as well just do kind of like the origin story. Can you kind of give an origin story a little bit?
Yeah. So we actually met while I was in business school at Vanderbilt in Nashville back in, I think that was 2016 or so.
Okay.
And I had taken a class called Launching the Venture with a guy, pretty successful entrepreneur named Michael Burcham, and was really inspired to start something, a technology company in particular. But of course, as a non-technical individual, I was going to need a partner to do that with. And it was an idea in a completely different space than we are now. It was an idea at the intersection of media and technology. But we were ultimately introduced by one of my classmates. And I remember the first time I met Warren, he was just very humble and kind and reserved. But then he just starts speaking. You're like, this guy is so impressive.
Speak with some authority.
Yeah. And I was like, he's just out of my league. He'll never build a business with me. And so I was like, I'm gonna take this slow. It's like dating. And so we over the next several months will just meet up at a local coffee shop and just talk about technology, talk about business. And, we built a relationship to the extent that we decided that we wanted to build a company together. And we took a stab at the idea at the intersection of media and technology that I originally had. Didn't work out the first time. And I mean, it ended up being one of the most valuable learning experiences of our lives, I think. I can certainly say so for me, but I think we both knew confidently that we would want to build something again. Right?
Sure.
And so here we are with Therify.
I love that. So can you give us a quick overview of what Therify is, just at a high level again?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we are a mental well-being platform focused on employers such as Indeed, Dataminer, Thumbtack. We've worked with DoorDash, Google as well. And we provide a range of capabilities for employers, starting at the core from a care navigation solution that matches employees with in-network providers, which drives down claims costs for employers, to virtual events, psychoeducation, and group support that drives engagement across organizations, as well as stress management and dedicated coaching solution for high impact and revenue generating teams, really with a focus on improving performance.
I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the things, obviously, one of the reasons why we got you back on is you had some funding happen recently. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Huge news. Can you talk about the amount, talk about maybe the process, talk about who you partnered with from that perspective?
Yeah. So this was actually our second fundraise. This was a $2 million round led by Jumpstart Nova, founded by Marcus Whitney, entrepreneur in Nashville. And, really just the perfect fit for us. Jumpstart Nova is a healthcare fund that invests in Black-founded healthcare companies. And so the level of expertise that they bring to the table, having LPs that are health plans, the level of expertise that Marcus brings to the table, joining our board, having been in the space for so long, has just been invaluable. So this was kind of our formal seed round. We had previously raised a $1.3 million pre-seed round from Y Combinator, Open Opportunity Fund, which used to be part of SoftBank, Looking Glass Capital, it's a fund out in New York, and a few other strategic angels.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So what's next for you guys? What are you doing with that money and all of that?
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's really about, narrowing and expanding our GTM motion, right? I think, we've got a really solid product, and, I have to give Warren and our product team all the engineering, all the credit for that. And now it's just really time to expand our growth, right? And cement our way toward product market fit. And so a lot of the resources that we're pouring into the company now are on the GTM side, right? I kind of started out, we're still doing founder-led sales.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And with me being, the salesperson, the AE, but also the customer success rep.
Yeah, and the BDR and everybody else.
And doing all the things. And so that's still the case, but I just think, pouring more resources around that motion is really important for our growth and path to product market fit going forward.
How are you guys doing in that perspective, right? Like, obviously you have a product that's been around for about 4 years, give or take now. You guys have had you mentioned some big companies that you've worked with. How are you guys getting yourself into some of these larger companies? Is it a lot of word of mouth? Is it cold reach out? Talk to me a little bit about how you're leading your go-to-market strategy as well as trying to build a company here all at the same time, and probably trying to have some semblance of a life as well.
Yeah. It's tough, it's tough to find that balance. I was fortunate to have some enterprise sales experience prior to Therify at a company called Envision. And then I worked on the partnerships team at Facebook and Instagram before as well. And so, a lot of the work early on and, securing, big logos like Indeed, for example, has been cold outreach through LinkedIn, right? And I think now, we're fortunate to have a pretty solid foundation of early customers where we can start, getting introductions, getting more kind of warm, kind of creating more of like a warm lead generation motion.
Yeah.
But, like any other startup, nobody knows who we are,
Yeah.
And so, we've had to do a lot of work. I think we've realized we've tried a few different approaches. We've tried like high volume email, all the way down to like more focused, kind of personalized, kind of account-based outreach through LinkedIn, which I think for us has actually been more successful in really building relationships with prospects and being in a position where we can deliver something of value and build a real relationship before we ask them for something, right? Like I always think about it as like a bank, right? We have to deposit cash before we take it out. And so, this motion of just like cold emailing thousands of people for a company of our stage is really not the move. And I think, email, especially as a channel, has become very saturated over the past couple of years.
Yeah, 100%. Warren, I want to kick it to you, man. Talk about maybe some really the product and what how can people use it? What does it look like? Can you kind of give a quick overview from that perspective?
Yeah, James touched on it. We think of care in a few different ways. There's the individual access, but we also think wellness is a team sport, something we say all the time. And so a big part of mental health is honestly the stigma. And so the product looks like a few different things. I would say the typical journey for a Therify user is probably interacting with us first through what we call like ERG sessions. These are events typically tied to affinity groups inside of the company, where we talk about issues that are relevant to them. Imagine like caregivers in the workplace or mothers returning back to the workplace themselves. This is a great time to really socialize the product, talk about all the things that we offer. And then from there, folks get funneled into our matching product, where really focus on you, your goals, what you've actually completed with therapy before, and tailoring those recommendations so we can get you connected with therapists for you. And so again, it's like this sort of team dynamic. How do we sort of socialize mental health, but then also connect you with your own personal resources and build that habit? We were talking about crossword. It's kind of easy to do crossword. I mean, it's hard to find time, but I think taking care of yourself is equally as difficult too. With so many things going on, Therify tries to make it easy to make it fit in your day. And so always exploring ways of making that more accessible for folks.
So ultimately you guys connect individuals companies were to use y'all to essentially add a mental health counseling perk within the organization. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fair. And so, typically like who is the buyer of Therify? It tends to be a mix of like a CHRO. This is a chief people person who has an initiative around engagement and wellness. That means we get interactions with benefits, interactions with DEI, but it really becomes like a team effort that ultimately becomes part of like a people strategy inside of the company.
Okay. Awesome. And then, and now in terms of like people watching this right now, like, can a normal random person off the street sign up and try to use y'all, or are you guys really only locked into like employees and like the company with employees? Does that make sense?
I'll say this, like commercially, absolutely, we're a B2B product, but I don't think we've ever turned someone away who's come to our door and said, we want to get matched. I think that's just sort of been our spirit and our mission of the company. And so even just last week, connecting some friends with some therapists, because one, it keeps us close to the problem. Makes me think about Brian Chesky, who just like to this day lets people rent out rooms in his house. So he's a host on Airbnb. What's that for us? And it's just like if James and I are doing a match for somebody, keeps us proximate to the story. I love it. So anyone listening who's like, man, I've been thinking about a therapist. Where do I start? Hit us up, man. You see Therify.co. Just do it.
I love it.
Big fan of therapy. So do you guys offer like sorry, Taylor. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say big fan of therapy too. That's all I was gonna say.
Oh, okay. Are you guys like a full all-in platform? Obviously, I know you do the connection, but do you guys do like the webcam access, the ability to send forms and all of the HIPAA stuff, but if there's going to be group chats or connecting with your therapist or group activities, those kind of things like a BetterHelp or other platforms out there. I can't think of the other one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, James, I don't know if you want to take that, but seems product related, maybe feels more okay. Yeah. So, no, actually we don't host the session. In fact, we really work with the providers on tools that they use. We've actually found that to be almost like a wellspring for us for just goodwill. I'll be honest, it's like a lot of providers feel squeezed by some of our competitors in that way, trying to own the data. There's a lot of distrust in this space, particularly big tech moving into healthcare. And so we really found just saying like, trust the provider. We do the vetting. Of course, we have a lot of confidence in our folks, but let them use the tools they're confident with and comfortable with. And we've also found just members enjoy that too. It's their connection with the therapist. We are really the facilitator and the means of access, and also those helpful nudges too. But that's kind of the extent of our involvement.
So walk me through how.
Oh, I think James, I think he may have been on mute.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying that's also the unique relationship, the unique insight as it pertains to providers, right? Because you have to understand, like there's the supply and demand, and the supply is just as important as the demand. And for a provider, there's just a really high switching cost, right? Unless like your entire business is being run on Therify, which is, I think, where we want to go, right? We want to be able to help providers build their businesses. But unless that's the case, for you to kind of uproot all of your existing tools for another platform is a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about, I want to go back to kind of this fundraising thing. What have you guys seen when you kind of were going out and fundraising, just the market climate right now? Any advice, just kind of like high level advice for entrepreneurs, you know, and founders right now?
Yeah. I'll start with this one. It's a very difficult process. Like there's nothing, at least to me, there's nothing enjoyable about it. Right. But I think, and I think there is money out there, but when I even think about our relationship with Jumpstart Nova, we met Marcus 2 years before he actually wrote a check. Right. And so my advice to founders would be, don't like use all of your time talking to investors. That's not a good use of time. But if there are investors who you think could be strategic, who you're really excited about, like take the time to start building those relationships now, right? Even if you're not raising right now. So by the time that you are needing a check, you've already built that relationship. They've been able to follow your progress over a certain period of time, and they'll have more confidence, right, about making that investment at the end of the day. Otherwise, you know, and we did this in our first round when we started really cold. I mean, we had to talk to 80 investors, you know, to raise $1 million. And so you don't want to spend all of that time, right? You want to be building your business. So that would be like my number one piece of advice. Just start building those relationships now.
Yeah.
How do you get connected to 80 different potential investors, right? Like I've never started a company that has like ever taken investment money, right? Like I started like a small media company and we're doing our thing on our own. How do you do that? How do you make time? How do you vet? Obviously, because there's a multi-vetting process on both sides, right? Like they're vetting you and you're vetting them, because you're not just looking for money. Everybody wants money, but you're also looking for strategic partners, because you don't want to just take $1 or $2 million and be like, okay, we're good forever. We want to grow and build a business that's not worth 5 million, but 100 million or 200 or whatever it can be. So how do you guys go through that process, and what's your frame of thought? I know you had a little bit of experience before. I'm not sure if that first company took investment, but how do you go through that process? Just from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah. So one, let me just say, I knew maybe one investor, like personally, before we raised our first round. And so that initial catalyst for us was going through an accelerator, like being in Y Combinator, and going through demo day. I mean, that was just a game changer for us in terms of getting inbound leads. And I would recommend that folks find channels like that. That could just introduce them to a lot of investors at one time. You know, otherwise.
Talk to me about like demo day. Is it like in the episode of Silicon Valley where you're standing in front of like 600 people and you just present?
Basically, you know, so
really?
I mean, so we were unique because we went through YC, you know, COVID was still pretty top of mind for folks. And so we were in our virtual class, whereas typically like you go out to the Bay Area and you pitch in person in like a big theater. And so for us, it was all over Zoom, but you're pitching over Zoom to, I mean, I don't know, it was thousands, it felt like thousands. I don't know the exact number, but it was at least 1,000 investors. And then YC also has this proprietary technology where for an investor, as you're watching these pitches, you can basically just like click a button and it automates like an email to the founders, right?
Oh wow!
So
that's pretty cool. It's kind of like the voice.
Like in the voice,
spin around.
Basically, yeah, literally.
That was good, Ted.
Got my head.
I mean, it was just like, it was unbelievable. And so immediately after demo day, I mean, you have to spend the next week just going through those emails. And so I think as someone who, for anyone who, you know, maybe comes from a community where you're just not connected to investors in that way, it is just a game changer in terms of that top of funnel. And that's how we thought about the process. Like, you have to build top of funnel, right?
Yeah, it's sales motion basically, right?
It's a sales motion, and so you have a spreadsheet, right? And then you segment, right, your investors A, B, C in terms of, those who you feel like are a good fit or not, and then that's how you prioritize your time, right? But ultimately, for us, we didn't know until we had those conversations with folks, and so we had to go through that process. Yeah.
And not to just I mean, YC is amazing, and so yeah, I guess it is to kind of hype up YC, but they have this tool, Bookface, where they have like a whole investorpedia basically, where other founders are saying good relationship, bad relationship, otherwise, and it's just really helpful to have sort of that tribal knowledge around these types of things. Because honestly, like you said, a lot of people asking for money, a lot of people trying to give money, but you really want to understand what that's like. And I would say probably maybe the pre-seed, it was friends of founders, these angels, people who've done it, founders who've gone around the bend themselves. Sometimes it is ex-operators who just have a passion around what you're building. I think we have sort of a connection to like social good, and that tends to speak to people. And so, I think having that really tight story, what you trying to do, really the mission and the vision, I think that's been just the key, particularly pre-seed sort of funding. But we could absolutely just dive into the different stages of funding and talk about how it changes and how you sort of change your narrative at each stage.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'd be curious if you want to shed some light on that.
I mean, first learning is that the narrative is totally different than the customer narrative.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like that was the first big learning for us. I think at pre-seed, you're so early, you barely, you got a couple customers, maybe you're doing like $5,000, $10,000 in MRR.
Sure.
And so
if that,
so at pre-seed, it was really about communicating a vision for what this could become.
Right.
Like how does this, and that vision has to align with something that is venture scale, right? Like this problem is so kind of deep and recurring, right?
What would you say what was that vision that you pitched?
Ooh.
Let me try to remember.
It's done.
I'm
change.
sure you guys have pivoted so many damn times at this point, but I'm just kind of curious. What was the original pre-seed vision?
Well, so we started out as we had this a strong DEI focus at the time.
Okay. When
we first started, and you got to remember, this was shortly after George Floyd as well.
Sure.
I think the disparities as it relates to mental health and communities of color in particular were really at the forefront, right? And so the vision for us was to create a platform that would work for anyone, right?
Yeah.
As a person of color, for example, or someone with a marginalized background, it's already difficult to find care that works for you, right? But to find care that also understands the nuances of your identity, right, is really difficult. And so our thing was that, we've built the most diverse provider network in the industry, right? Our matches are higher quality, right? People use Therify 3 to 4 times more than other benefits because of our ability to meet people where they are in that way. And so it was a very personal story too for me, right? Having gone through this process, trying to find, Black women, for example. I was raised by Black women, so that's what I feel most comfortable with. And, going through 6 or 7 consultations and not being able to find a fit, right? So
yeah,
I think there was strong founder fit to the problem, as well as during that time a need that was really, being highlighted in the wake of George Floyd.
Yeah. And it's pretty interesting too, from the product perspective. Generally in healthcare, the thought is if you have a solution or therapy that works for marginalized populations, there is a thought also in sort of venture and sort of investment in healthcare spaces that product also works really well for more generalized populations. And so you think about therapies, maybe not, I'm not getting into gene therapy or medications, but this is generally practices and processes that you are really taking the hardest things, populations that don't engage in these services, don't typically have resources available to them, solving for that is actually a pretty big boat in saying that if I'm run-of-the-mill Joe Schmo, never heard about therapy, never done the thing, well, this solution that works for like, I don't know, like SEAL Team 6 level complexity now really, really works well for the guy off the street. And so that's really sort of the product narrative that people were excited about, where it's like, you guys are taking on the really tough stuff. People who've never thought about this, how do you socialize and engage, convert those people into active users of this service? That's where therapy is so exciting. If you look at it, less than almost 12% of the population regularly see a therapist. Imagine that inverted now, and there's a company that captures that opportunity. That's a huge deal. And even massive health systems struggle with this too. And so that's sort of like that tide that raises all ships, that when we talk about our problem and saying we're going to be acutely focused, hardest cases, most intersectionalities imaginable, like a case that we worked, it's going to sound kind of crazy, but imagine someone saying, I need a therapist who knows ASL, who themselves is a second generation immigrant. So they understand that aspect too. And it would be great too if they also in their ASL had a concept of Spanish, like diaspora, Hispanic diaspora. We've done that case, right?
Good Lord. That's like
that's
extremely nuanced.
Absolutely. And that's what our product does. And so when people hear that story and they see what's possible when you focus on the hardest things, I mean, that's what investors love to hear. It's like, who's doing the grimy, dirty, no one wants to touch it? Because oftentimes that's like the inverse again of that problem that actually is a really big problem.
Dan's thinking. Dan's got his thinking brain on.
Whatever
he does, he's thinking.
I would add, I think it's been interesting to see how we've had to like shift that narrative too. Everything that is saying is still true. But as we've kind of over the past year, going through our seed round, really a lot of the focus has had to be on what is the ROI and the business impact for the employers who we're serving, right? Because they're our customer, right? But we also have users who we're serving. And I think, for us, we thought about, what is the business impact? You think about, you have more people than ever accessing therapy, but at the same time, 30 to 40% of them are going out of network for care because it's difficult to find in-network care.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the employer, right? The cost of an out-of-network claim is typically twice that of an in-network claim, right? So 30 to 40% of people who are accessing therapy are going out of network. That's a problem. And so because we have this 99% in-network match rate, we're directing everybody to in-network care. We're saving employers about $1,000 for every employee who uses our product.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
And so that's had to come through, and not just the fundraising process, but also in our GTM motion, right? As you've seen kind of the focus on DEI, of course, Wade, right? We've had to really hone in on that business impact and ROI. And that's how the narrative has evolved over the past year or so.
It's huge.
Not to lay it on too thick, but I mean, we're talking.
Come on, man. This is for y'all. I love it. I love it. Lay it on thick.
But it's true. It's like, where does mental health show up in the workplace? It's in our interactions with our peers. It's my time away from the office. You think about these roles. James touched on it earlier in the call. High stress, high pressure opportunities. Taylor, you work in recruitment. If I'm not actually making calls, I'm not able to sort of compartmentalize that bad call where someone hung up on me and move on to the next line of business. I'm actually reverse productive, if that's like a thing. It's like I'm having some sort of inverse work on my productivity. So how do you do that? That's a mindset. And Taylor, you talk about it all the time. So I'm really sort of showcasing you and sort of how you talk about work, but it's like how you show up for work, how you do that. And we think that is a component of mental health. And so as our products evolve, we've gotten more what we call tactical in the skills that we help people install in themselves. And so a therapist or a coach who can say, man, I know that was a really tough sort of sales cycle, but you got to clean yourself up. You got to get back in there. But what companies are finding, people are taking time away from work. They are saying, I need leave of absence to sort of deal with this stress. I think employers are saying there is this intersection of supporting our people, making sure they have the resources that they need. And then, of course, the downstream things like sales quota attainment, productivity in the workplace. And so engagement, people think is like, what we have this theory. There's I don't think a lot of data to support it. McKinsey put out a similar report, but the idea is that engagement, lack thereof, is one of the biggest drivers of inflation that we're not even talking about. Where if we're not very productive in our workplace, think about everything else. That cost is multiplicative for everyone. And so how do you approach this? It's going to take a big strategy, but we think a big role in this is wellness. If I feel like my manager can recognize stress, identify people who may need actually, you know what? Take this mental health day this Friday, have a 3-day weekend. I'll see you next week. That's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
What are we doing for parents, caregivers in the workplace? Again, we think this is like a soft skill that no one learns, but Therify, of course, is trying to create those opportunities to teach those things. And so it is, of course, the direct ROI, cost savings on the matching, but it's actually this investment in some of those soft skills to alleviate some of these engagement challenges in the workplace. And so, the problem's evolved a little bit, but, I think that's sort of the nuance in recognizing, it's a big problem.
Need to get you connected. I podcast with a girl last week, Christy Hoffman. She's out of Austin. She basically built a company called Engagement Academy where she focuses on like making sure employees feel safe and are engaged at work. And so I think it'd be good to introduce you guys. So I'll do that. I'll do that after the show. So
that sounds awesome.
I think it could be cool.
Great.
Sweet. All right, boys. Anything else you want to tease? Anything else that obviously I threw up the website, Therify.co. Go check them out. Anything else from you guys?
James, I guess, we talked about sort of fundraising. I think there is sort of interest in, can we do some more of that going into the next year? I don't know if you want to talk about maybe the next round and how to get in touch with us.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, the dream is to support our own destiny,
That's right.
And be profitable. That said, we'll probably do another round next year.
Okay.
And so, we're always excited, especially to talk to, healthcare investors, folks who understand the space. And I guess the best way to get in touch is just reaching out to me or Warren. My email is jem@therify.co. Warren's is warren@therify.co. And also just anyone who's interested in kind of the intersection between well-being and the workplace, we're always, happy to have conversations, think about how we can put more education out into the space, whether it be for HR leaders, benefits leaders, rewards leaders, or also just individual employees who are, trying to take control of their well-being. Happy to chat and collab.
Love it. Love it,
man.
Sweet.
It's a really
Guys,
great platform.
Again, this is awesome. Love seeing companies grow like y'all. So that's super exciting. And I'm sure Dan and I will obviously be on the lookout for any ways we can connect y'all to folks too. So
awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Best of luck, guys.
You guys stay on so I can say about it. We can say bye to y'all backstage. But again, thank y'all. I saw the ticker. We've actually had a fair amount of people watch us. So again, thank y'all for hanging out with us this morning. We appreciate it. And this will be the last Unicorn Finders for a bit because my wife's about to have a kid any day now. So so I'm taking some time off. But Dan and I will be back in a few weeks. So y'all have a good one. We'll see y'all later.
All right.
Peace.
Thanks.